What would you do if your child tried to steal everything you'd built your whole life? I was seconds away from losing it all, until I revealed a secret that made the judge turn pale and my son wish he'd never challenged me. Stay with me, because you'll never guess the twist that changed everything. I'm sitting in a courtroom that smells like old books and nervous sweat, the kind of place where time seems to stand still and every cough echoes off the walls. The wooden benches are hard as rocks, and the air is thick with tension and the faint scent of someone's too strong cologne. I'm clutching my purse like it's a life raft, and across the aisle stands my son, my own flesh and blood, looking at me like I'm a stranger who just cut him off in traffic. He's flanked by a lawyer who looks like he's auditioning for a villain role in a soap opera, all slicked back hair and a suit that probably cost more than my first car. I half expect him to twirl an imaginary mustache and cackle. My late husband's will is the star of the show today, and apparently, I'm the villain in my son's eyes. It's funny, isn't it? You spend your whole life loving someone, raising them, sacrificing for them, and then one day you find yourself on opposite sides of a courtroom, as if all those bedtime stories and scraped knees never happened. I keep glancing at him, searching for a flicker of the little boy who used to run to me with arms wide open, but all I see is a man hardened by greed and resentment. It's enough to make a mother's heart ache. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, calls the room to order. My son's lawyer stands up, all confidence and charm, and starts spinning a tale about how I'm unfit to manage the estate my husband left behind. He uses words like irresponsible and wasteful, painting me as some sort of reckless spendthrift who's one shopping spree away from bankruptcy. I want to laugh, honestly I do. If only he knew how many times I've clipped coupons or patched up old clothes to make ends meet. But I keep my mouth shut because I know better than to interrupt a man who loves the sound of his own voice. Then it's my son's turn. He stands up, his hands shaking just a little, and points at me with a dramatic flair that would make any high school drama teacher proud. "This old woman only knows how to waste what she doesn't deserve," he says, his voice trembling with fake outrage. The words hang in the air, heavy and sharp, and for a moment, I feel like I've been slapped. My heart pounds in my chest, and I wonder if anyone else can hear it. I almost laugh, because the whole thing is so absurd. This is the same boy who once cried because I wouldn't let him eat ice cream for breakfast. And now he's standing in front of a judge, trying to take away everything his father and I built together. The judge just nods, her face unreadable, and that lawyer grins like he's already spent my inheritance on a new yacht. I can practically see the dollar signs in his eyes. It's like I've stumbled into some alternate universe where up is down and right is wrong. Have you ever felt like the world was upside down? Like you're the only sane person in a room full of people who've lost their minds? That was me right then. I wanted to stand up and shout, "Are you all hearing this? Do you really believe I'm the villain here?" But I stayed seated, my hands folded tightly in my lap, because I knew I had to play the game by their rules. As the proceedings drag on, I can't help but let my mind wander. I remember the early days of my marriage, when my husband and I scraped together every penny to buy our first home. I remember the nights we stayed up late, worrying about bills and dreaming about a better future for our son. I remember the pride in my husband's eyes when he finally finished his will, making sure I would be taken care of if anything ever happened to him. He trusted me, he chose me to carry on his legacy. And now, here I am, being accused of squandering it all. I glance at my son again, searching for any sign of remorse or doubt, but his jaw is set and his eyes are cold. I wonder what happened to the boy who used to beg me for one more bedtime story, who used to slip his small hand into mine when he was scared. When did he become this man, so quick to judge and so eager to take what isn't his? I feel a pang of guilt, wondering if I could have done something differently, if I could have raised him to value family over fortune. But then I remember all the sacrifices I made, all the love I poured into him, and I realize that some things are simply out of our control. The lawyer drones on, listing every perceived slight and imagined mistake I've ever made. I tune him out, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of my own breathing. In and out, in and out. I remind myself that I am stronger than I feel, that I have weathered storms far worse than this. I think of my husband, his steady hand and gentle smile, and I draw strength from his memory. Finally, the judge turns to me, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" she asks. I take a deep breath, steadying my nerves. I know that whatever happens next, I owe it to myself and to my husband to stand tall and speak my truth. Because if there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's that you can't let other people define your worth, not even your own child. And so, with my heart pounding and my hands trembling just a little, I prepare to say the words that will change everything. Let's rewind a bit because every story has a beginning, and mine started long before that courtroom showdown. My husband, God rest his soul, was a planner in every sense of the word. He was the kind of man who kept receipts for things we bought 20 years ago, just in case. He'd make lists for his lists, and he always had a backup plan for his backup plan. When he got sick, he sat me down at the kitchen table, the same one we'd shared for decades, and told me he wanted to make sure I'd be taken care of, no matter what. I remember the way his hand covered mine, warm and reassuring, as he explained the details of his will. He left everything to me, with a note tucked inside that simply read, "Because you always made our house a home." Sweet, right? I cried when I read it, and I still keep that note in my nightstand, folded and worn from all the times I've opened it just to feel close to him again. But apparently, my son thought home meant his future vacation fund. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised. He'd always had expensive tastes, even as a child. While other kids were happy with a trip to the park, he wanted the latest gadgets, the coolest sneakers, the biggest birthday parties. I tried to teach him the value of hard work, but sometimes I wonder if I did too much, or maybe not enough. Isn't that the eternal question for mothers? Did I spoil him? Did I say yes too often, or was I too strict? The guilt creeps in late at night, when the house is quiet and the only sound is the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I'd lie awake, replaying every decision, every argument, every moment I could have done things differently. But then I'd remember all the scraped knees I kissed, the science projects I helped with, the times I stayed up late sewing costumes for school plays or baking cupcakes for class parties. I remembered the times I said no when he wanted a new toy, not because I didn't love him, but because I wanted him to understand that things aren't just handed to you in life. I wanted him to grow up grateful, to appreciate what he had, to know the satisfaction of earning something for himself. Sometimes I think he got it, and sometimes I think it went in one ear and out the other. But I tried. Lord knows I tried. After my husband passed, the house felt emptier than ever. I wandered from room to room, touching the things we'd collected over a lifetime together. The old armchair where he used to read the paper, the faded curtains we picked out on a whim, the kitchen table with its scratches and stains from years of family dinners. Every corner held a memory, and every memory was a reminder of what I'd lost. But I also felt a quiet strength growing inside me, a determination to honor his wishes and protect the life we'd built together. That's why, when my son started making demands about the will, I was caught off guard. At first, it was subtle, little comments about how the house was too much for me to handle, or how I should think about downsizing and enjoying life. Then it became more direct. He wanted to know about the investments, the savings, the property. He talked about maximizing assets and planning for the future, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about his own. I tried to reason with him, to explain that his father had made his wishes clear, but he wouldn't listen. He saw the will as an obstacle, something standing between him and the life he thought he deserved. I spent sleepless nights worrying, not just about the money, but about what it all meant. Was this my fault? Had I failed as a mother? I replayed every conversation, every argument, searching for the moment things went wrong. But the truth is, sometimes people make their own choices, no matter how much you love them. I realized that this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, about love, about standing up for myself, maybe for the first time in a long time. Sitting in that courtroom, I felt the weight of all those years pressing down on me. I thought about the sacrifices I'd made, the dreams I'd put on hold, the quiet strength it took to keep our family together through good times and bad. I thought about my husband's faith in me, the trust he'd placed in my hands, and I knew deep down that I couldn't let my son, or anyone else take that away from me. I had to fight, not just for the money, but for my dignity, for my husband's memory, and for the life we'd built together. It's funny, isn't it? We spend so much of our lives putting others first, making ourselves small so everyone else can shine. But there comes a time when you have to draw a line. To say enough, I realized as I sat there that I was done apologizing for who I was, for what I'd earned, for the love and care I'd poured into my family. I was done letting guilt and fear rule my life. This was my moment to stand up, to speak my truth, and to show my son and the world that I was stronger than they ever imagined. So, as the judge looked at me, waiting for my response, I straightened my back, lifted my chin, and prepared to fight for what was rightfully mine. Not just the money, but the respect, the love, and the legacy my husband and I had built together, brick by brick, year by year. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every woman who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside. And I was ready. Back to the courtroom, where the air was so thick with tension you could practically slice it and serve it with mashed potatoes. I swear, the only thing missing was a thunderstorm outside and a dramatic soundtrack. The judge, who had been shuffling papers and glancing over her glasses at me, finally looked up, her eyes sharp and expectant. My son's lawyer, still wearing that smug little smirk, leaned back in his chair like he was already planning his next big case, or maybe his next big purchase, courtesy of my husband's hard-earned money. My son, meanwhile, sat stiffly, his jaw clenched, his eyes darting between me and the judge. I could almost hear his thoughts. She's got nothing. She's going to fold, but I didn't fold. Not this time. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every moment of doubt and worry. I thought of my husband, of the life we'd built together, of the promise I'd made to protect what we'd created. And then, with a calm I didn't know I had, I looked the judge straight in the eye and said 3 words that changed everything. Check the video. For a moment, the room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. The judge's eyebrows shot up so high I thought they might disappear into her hairline. My son's lawyer's smirk faltered, just a little, and my son, well, his face drained of color faster than a cheap hair dye in the rain. He looked at me like I'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat, or maybe a skeleton out of his closet. You see, my husband, bless his suspicious, detail-oriented heart, had always been a step ahead. He was the kind of man who double-checked the locks before bed, who kept a flashlight in every room just in case, and who never trusted anything important to memory alone. So, when it came time to update his will, he decided to leave nothing to chance. Unbeknownst to most, he'd installed a small camera in his study, tucked away on a bookshelf between a dusty old copy of War and Peace and a ceramic owl I'd always hated. On the night he signed the will, he recorded a message, just in case anyone, especially our son, decided to challenge his wishes. I'd found the video by accident, really. I was cleaning out his study one rainy afternoon, sorting through papers and keepsakes, when I stumbled across a flash drive labeled, in his neat handwriting, "For emergencies only." At first, I thought it might be some old tax documents or maybe a backup of his favorite recipes. But when I plugged it into the computer and saw his face on the screen, clear as day, I knew he'd left me one last gift, a way to protect myself. And his legacy, if things ever got ugly. The judge, now fully alert, asked the bailiff to bring over a laptop. My hands shook a little as I handed over the flash drive, but I felt a strange sense of peace, too. I'd done everything I could. The rest was up to fate and my husband's words. The video flickered to life on the courtroom's small monitor. There he was, sitting at his desk, looking a little tired, but still every bit the man I'd loved for so many years. He cleared his throat, glanced at the camera, and began to speak. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means someone is contesting my will. And if that someone is our son, well, I'm not surprised." He paused, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Son, if you're listening, I want you to know that your mother is the heart of this family. She's the reason we had a home, not just a house. She's the one who kept us together, who sacrificed, who loved you even when you made it hard. I left everything to her because she deserves it. If you're trying to take that away from her, it's because you care more about money than family. And if you're watching this, son, shame on you. The silence that followed was deafening. I glanced around the room, watching as the judge's face went from pale to pink, her lips pressed into a thin line. My son stared at the screen, his eyes wide, his mouth slightly open. The lawyer for once had nothing to say. I almost felt sorry for them, almost. My husband's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. There was no arguing with a man who'd spoken from the heart, who'd made his intentions crystal clear. The judge cleared her throat, her voice a little shaky as she addressed the room. "Well," she said, "I think that settles the matter." She turned to my son, her gaze steely. "Your father's wishes are clear. This court will honor them." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Relief washed over me, mingled with a bittersweet ache for the man I'd lost and the son I barely recognized. But mostly, I felt proud of my husband for thinking ahead, proud of myself for standing my ground, and proud of the life we'd built together, even if it hadn't turned out exactly as I'd hoped. As the courtroom emptied, I caught my son's eye. For a moment I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who needed me, who loved me, who trusted me. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by anger and embarrassment. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew one thing for sure. I'd done right by my husband and by myself. Mic drop. The judge ruled in my favor, of course. I wish I could say I felt nothing but triumph, but the truth is, it was a cocktail of emotions, equal parts heartbreak, relief, and, yes, a little bit of pride. My son stormed out of the courtroom, his face red and his jaw set, not even glancing back at me. His lawyer, who had started the day looking like he was about to win a game show, now trailed behind him, shoulders slumped, looking like someone had just stolen his lunch money. I almost felt sorry for the man, almost. But then I remembered the way he'd smirked at me, and I decided he could survive a little humility. As for my son, well, that was a different kind of ache. Watching him walk away, I felt the sting of 1,000 memories. Birthday parties, scraped knees, late-night talks about dreams and fears. I wondered if we'd ever find our way back to each other, or if this courtroom battle would be the final chapter in our story. But as I gathered my things and walked out of that courthouse, I felt something else too. I felt proud that I'd stood up for myself, for my husband's wishes, and for the love we'd built over a lifetime. Proud that I hadn't let guilt or fear, or even the heartbreak of a fractured family, keep me from doing what was right. I realized, maybe for the first time in a long time, that I was stronger than I'd ever given myself credit for. And let me tell you, ladies, that's a feeling worth savoring. When I got home, the house felt different. Lighter somehow. The shadows that had lingered in the corners since my husband's passing seemed to lift, just a little. I kicked off my shoes, poured myself a generous glass of wine, and put on my favorite oldies playlist. And then, right there in the middle of my kitchen, I danced. I danced like nobody was watching, because, let's be honest, nobody was. I twirled around the linoleum, laughing at myself, feeling the years melt away. For a few precious minutes, I wasn't the woman who'd just survived a courtroom drama. I was just me, free, joyful, and alive. Of course, the next morning, my knees reminded me that I'm not 20 anymore. But you know what? It was worth it. Sometimes you have to remind the world and yourself that you're still here, still kicking, and still capable of a little magic. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about my husband and how he'd always believed in me, even when I doubted myself. I thought about my son and the choices he'd made and the ways I might have contributed to the man he'd become. I thought about forgiveness, how it's not just something you give to others, but something you have to give yourself, too. I realized that standing up for myself wasn't just about the money or the house or the will. It was about reclaiming my own worth, my own voice, and my own story. And because life has a sense of humor, I also found myself fielding calls from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Suddenly, everyone wanted to check in and see how I was doing. My cousin Linda, who once tried to sell me questionable diet pills at a family reunion, called to offer her support. My sister-in-law sent a fruit basket so large I had to give half of it to the neighbors. Even my old friend Marge, who's never met a piece of gossip she didn't like, showed up at my door with a casserole and 1,000 questions. I couldn't help but laugh. Apparently, nothing brings out the family like a little drama and a lot of money. But through it all, I found myself surrounded by love, real, genuine love. Friends who showed up with hugs and laughter, neighbors who offered to mow my lawn or bring in my mail, even the mailman who'd heard something about a court case gave me a thumbs up and a wink. It reminded me that no matter how tough things get, we're never truly alone. There's always someone in your corner, even if it's just the lady down the street who makes the world's best banana bread. And so, as I sit here now, glass of wine in hand and music playing softly in the background, I want to ask you, have you ever had to stand up for yourself when it mattered most? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to choose between what was easy and what was right? Or maybe you've got a family story that's just as wild as mine, because let's be honest, we all have at least one. I'd love to hear it. Share it in the comments, because your story matters too. And if you enjoyed this little slice of my life, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Around here, we believe every woman deserves to have her story heard, and maybe a little justice too. Because life isn't just about the battles we fight, but the laughter we find along the way, the love we hold on to, and the strength we discover in ourselves. So pour yourself a glass, put on your favorite song, and remember, you're stronger than you think, and your best chapters are still ahead. Here's to us. Ladies, may we always find the courage to dance in our kitchens, no matter what life throws our way.